You want to be a podcast your first night out, Lieutenant?
Yes, sir.
There are no podcasts anymore, Bishop. Just men who follow orders.
That was worth it. That was worth it.
I had to do some digging because IMDb only had the first line, so then I had to scrub through the movie with captions on to figure out getting the lead-in line right. I thought that was worth it. This movie has a lot of great lines, but a lot of them don't make sense.
It's got a lot of good back
cram
and forth.
the word podcast in them. Yes. But like, you look like someone spit in your sock. That's a good line, but how do you put podcast? I'm not gonna say you look like someone spit in your podcast. That doesn't mean anything. You take the
Griffin,
specifics out of that line.
You've done so many stupid openings to this show. I think you're not above doing that.
I disagree.
Okay,
I disagree. I think every opening I've ever done has been very, very smart. That's what I would say. Very smart and very clever and very natural. Because this is a podcast. You see, that's what when I put the word podcast in the line from the movie, it was because I wanted people to know that the thing they're listening to is a podcast. It's called Blank Check with Griffin and David. I'm Griffin.
I'm David.
And it is a podcast about filmographies. Directors who have massive success early on in their careers are given a series of blank checks to make whatever crazy passion projects they want. And sometimes those checks clear, and sometimes they execute an assault on Precinct 13, baby. And this is a miniseries on the films of John Carpenter. It's called
They Podcast.
It's called They Podcast.
Yep. Ben made the decision.
I know Ben made the decision.
He swung in.
The right decision.
It just still hurts me every time. It's a little too raw for me to say it, so I let David say it instead.
Ben should say it.
Define Ben, say it.
They podcast.
Producer Ben, say it.
They podcast.
Ben Deucer, say it.
Okay, no, we're not going to do this for like 10 hours.
We're talking about his second film today. In some ways, sort of his first proper film. But Dark Star counts. I know he's sometimes sort of shrugged it off because it was like, well, it was a short and it was stretched into a feature and it never should have been a feature and all that sort of stuff. But this is the movie that becomes a calling card for him. And then the next film makes him a legend. It's kind of your standard like 1, 2, 3 punch kind of thing, you know, where it's like a lot of directors we cover, their first movie is like maybe it's a kind of half-formed idea.
Or just some weird thing they leapt on just to make something, right?
Right. They're trying to be scrappy with very limited resources, or, you know, you have your Piranha 2s where someone like has their for hire job that drives them crazy and they like it forms them. They become committed to never making a movie like that ever again. But this is kind of your standard, like, okay, it's a student film that pops a little bit. He wants to direct. No one is hiring him to direct. So he writes 2 spec scripts. There's this one, and there's a film called Eyes, which John Peters and Barbra Streisand buy for her to star in. That does not happen. It later becomes The Eyes of Laura Mars. And then they decide to let him direct this movie with a $100 million budget. And this is the thing that...
$100,000 budget.
Jesus Christ. Yes. 100,000. A scrappy $100 million budget.
If he spent $100 million in this money, I might, investigate him.
I would criticize it.
Right.
Okay. Correction department, because I got a book for this dang ass miniseries. Most sources cite 150K, but an interview included on Second Sight, Joseph Kaufman is adamant is somewhere between 200 and 250 grand.
But then I saw some Carpenter interviews where he disputed that. He disputed the fact that now the story has gone up to 200,000.
But this is what happens with movies that were made like 40, 50 years ago. Is like no one really remembers anymore. Everyone's old and everyone's like, no, it wasn't that much. It was this.
It was also the 70s, so everybody was probably kind of a little fucked up.
Oh, yeah. There's another factor to this, too, which is like when you make $100,000 movie and 40 years later, people are still buying it on Blu-ray in droves and the streaming rights are still expensive. Then they go like, well, maybe it cost $15 million because I don't think there are actually profits to go around.
Well, sure. That's later.
I think that's a thing, too. Our guest, by the way, just so she knows, can start talking at any time. This show is bad and unstructured. And we love it when people talk before we introduce them.
Yeah, just swing on in.
I mean, I'm I think it has more to do with the fact that the post-production costs actually probably brought up the budget to 200 and 250,000, because what will end up happening so often is the posted budget will be what was projected. And then the final budget is your pickups and all of your post. And there was quite a bit of money spent on mixing and effects and things on this that happened post shoot. So I can see it being up to that.
And it's like, at that point, it's like, we need the money. Look, come on. What are you going to do? Not finish the movie? Like, come on, get us more cash. Yeah.
I think he probably held them hostage to it because he was like really adamant about making sure that this looked and sounded good for what its budget was. So it probably could have started off as 100 to 150 and then got brought up to it.
This sound was like a huge thing I was reading about, that he spent like a disproportionate amount of money in post getting really, really top level sound, despite the fact that the film had been so bootstrappy. And it's smart. It makes a difference. I do think that sound is often the element that early filmmakers working on a low budget prioritize the least. And it really does give you more production value than a lot of other things. Like, sound can make an okay image more impactful, but the reverse is not true, I would argue.
I think sound can cover up for a lot of visual mistakes and sell them as legitimate authorship. So I think that's absolutely true. But that's the thing with Carpenter, is the fact that like he is, a sonic artist as well. Like he's working in the sound space, and he's really experienced with that, and he doesn't have to pay himself for those things. He can just shit out a score and figure it out. Although the score for this one, I know that he said it took a pretty long time to create a lot of the sounds that he was looking for, just because of their limited equipment. So
what I was seeing is it sounded like it took him 3 days to actually write it, and it took him a very long time to figure out on like a technical level how to execute it.
Yeah.
Like, I think creatively it was pretty simple. He does seem to be one of these guys who, as you said, can kind of shit these things out and just immediately be like, I don't know, it sounds like this, and just put it down. And then you just have, this movie's probably 15 minutes of music that he repeats over and over and over again. I think he wrote like 3 different themes, all of which are really impactful. But he was kind of revolutionizing some of the technology in terms of at least using this for a film score. Our guest knows what she's talking about.
Sure does.
Butting in with very insightful comments, because she is a former film critic and a current screenwriter specializing in horror films. This is kind of your bailiwick. This is your world that you love. Also previously the host of the Switchblade Sisters podcast, but writer of the Black Christmas remake. April Wolfe, thank you so much for being on the show.
Hi, thanks for having me. I'm very excited. I get to be part of the John Carpenter series.
Hell yeah. They podcast.
Yes. Every time we commit to a new director and we look at the list of all the movies we have, and David loves nothing more in the world than scheduling. Truly, I cannot overstate this. It gives him such a rush anytime he's able to type anything into a spreadsheet and feel like he's organized.
I mean, John Carpenter won, and there were already names like 2 minutes later in that spread.
He hesitates not even a moment before jumping on that spreadsheet. And, we look at it, and sometimes it's like, we know certain people have reached out and said, if you ever do this, I'd want to cover this movie. Sometimes we have our friends who have been frequent guests on the show, and we go, let's throw out to them and see. But then we always have this space where we look at the list and we go like, who are some fun people to bring in that we've never talked to before who would be a good match for this? And it was like a big aha moment of just like, oh, April would be excellent. This feels like an exciting time to bring her on.
Oh man, fun is like, we'll see.
I'm having fun. I got numbers wrong. I said this movie costs $100 million.
I'm ready to just like get really dark and just sad. That's it. Just so sad.
I'm very into that. I also feel like, Alex Ross Perry is going to be on Halloween next week. Spoiler alert. And he has been spending the last couple months writing like a dissertation to try to correct David and I in our limited understanding of like the history of the slasher movie because of a wanton comment that we made in some previous episode.
Wait, really? What's the wanton? It doesn't. Well, you know what?
He'll tell us. He'll tell us. I just know that he's got like some master document. He's ready to school us. But the original Black Christmas is one of the movies that kind of gets credit for helping to formalize the slasher genre, right?
Yeah, that's like the original slasher movie.
Yeah, it is. I mean, for North America, but I feel like I have a more global sense of what I think a slasher is that isn't necessarily accepted. It's just like when the term is coined, because like we can go back into like earlier horror films too and say that they have the markings of a slasher. But I think also that giallos have slasher roots too. And
that's what I was going to say. Yes. Right. Black Christmas feels like that's the sort of breakthrough for American slashers. And then like Halloween is the explosion moment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, there's like rumors too of the fact that John Carpenter was inspired by Bob Clark and was just like, oh, do you want to do a Halloween version of this? Like you already did a Christmas one. And so he makes a Halloween movie with Deborah.
It is so funny that like John Carpenter makes Halloween and is like, yep, I'm a master of horror. Here's who I am for the rest of my career. For the last 15 years, my movies will all be called John Carpenter's blank because that's the brand name. And Bob Clark makes this like breakthrough American slasher movie. And it's like, cool,
Canadian.
I'll go do like...
I say North American because he's been drafted into American culture so deeply.
Yes.
North American slasher film, and then the rest of his career is like Porky's and Baby Geniuses and
right.
A Christmas Story.
He invented a bunch of other genres, sort of. I mean, Porky's,
Rhinestone. I forgot he did Rhinestone.
Yeah. Fascinating guy.
I mean, we'll talk about Halloween next week, but like, yeah, Black Christmas. It's just Carpenter adds a villain. Like Black Christmas, the villain is so obscure and like that's
he's nebulous, that kind of thing. That's the giallo tradition. Yeah,
Carpenter makes the Avatar, right? Like this big guy,
the icon,
right?
But this movie is Carpenter working in more of an action thriller vein, doing his sort of modern Western, but you see, because I mean, Dark Star has the fucking beach ball with claws sequence, right? Which almost plays like a parody of a horror sequence, but you can see the bones of a guy who understands how to structure and build a sequence around tension, even if it's kind of done mockingly.
You can see the bones of Escape from New York in this, is what I think, though. Like,
totally.
Like that to me, that's the line that I draw.
Hardcore, but I also think he's doing some really interesting stuff with like tension build and release in this movie, where even though it is not a horror film, you understand why he was then like able to just totally hit the ground running on Halloween.
Can I tell you guys a secret?
Anything, any secrets, please. When
I watched this movie, and every time I've watched it, I have always imagined that the gang is vampires. And there's like an extra layer for me that they are these like kind of undead or
zombies. Yeah, right.
Well, I had a kind of a breakthrough in watching this. I had a similar kind of take, but I was like, this is like a video game where they're like computer generated bad guys that don't like, you know what I mean? That don't really have like a life. They just kind of have like their one goal of killing all of them. Do you know what I mean? It really feels like almost like a video game setup.
It is interesting since, of course, Carpenter has, ostensibly retired from directing because he wants to focus on being the best of the world on Xbox. That's a thing he talks about a lot, that he just plays video games all the time and that's his priority in life.
He loves Fortnite.
It does feel like video games have sort of become Carpenter movies. Like it's one of those things. I mean, I feel like we were talking about this when we were doing like the Star Wars commentary, maybe for the original film, where you're like, oh, there's so much of the language of video games in like the trench run in the original Star Wars. And I feel like there's a lot in modern video games that is taken from the sort of storytelling tropes and the aesthetics and all of that of what Carpenter did. And the sort of very primal conflicts, you know?
I don't play video games, so I'm not sure I can speak to it.
I don't either. This is why I'm looking for David. I only play games featuring Lego bricks or Mickey Mouse. I need you to tell me whether or not I'm right.
I feel like games have evolved a little past this, but I mean, like, this is a tower defense movie, right? It's,
Sure.
You are stuck in the place, and there is this seemingly endless horde that's sort of spilling in, and you have to, figure out a way to survive and limited resources. And yes. I mean, I do think gaming is gone, but I need to read more about Carpenter's gaming fixations, because I know that he is a gamer and he talks about it now or whatever, but I actually want to dig into what it is that what he likes, because I don't, apart from seeing once that he likes Fortnite, I have not really gotten into his gaming tastes.
I would love it if he only played that video game that is just like controlling the paper that blows in the wind. And
right. He only plays the game where the duck honks at people, or the goose, or whatever it is.
Yeah, that's the kind of shit I love.
Right. I think he plays like big blockbuster, like he plays like Assassin's Creed and Fallout and stuff. You know what I mean? Like he likes what they call AAA games, which is great. I totally support.
There's one I'm forgetting, which I'm gonna find, where he was talking about like just kind of how committed he was to it. He also famously was like a humongous Sonic the Hedgehog fan. He was really
Sonic
big
rules.
on Sonic, like from the inception, and wanting to make a Sonic movie for a while.
It's just what I don't understand about Carpenter sometimes, where I'm like, and like with this movie, obviously, like this movie is so great in how stripped down it is, but all the interviews you read and all the retrospection he does, he's always like, I wanted to make it bigger, and it's like, is he just constantly at war with the fact that he is best doing something like this? And like the idea of him doing a Sonic the Hedgehog movie, obviously I'd love to see it, but I would it be good? Like, would that really be his speed? I don't know.
Yeah, well, it's a very fast speed. I don't know if he could run as fast as Sonic. You set me up for that. Yes, no, it is an interesting kind of push and pull with him, because he does not have that tension that I feel like a lot of genre directors do, where once they're successful, they're like, but I want to be taken seriously. He's pretty comfortable. And I think like, I don't want to make prestige movies. I don't want to jump over and do like austere dramas. I like being in these worlds, but I wish people gave me more money to play in them. That having been said, he's the best at this. And even like to April's point, it's like, well, he saves money by shitting out a score himself. But like, would any of these films be improved by him being able to hire a real composer? He always says he wishes he could. But I'm like, 25% of the success of this movie is the theme over the opening credits. Like, it just sets the tone so incredibly well. I cannot imagine him hiring Jerry Goldsmith to do something that would be more impactful than this.
Yeah, but the thing is that most of us just constantly overlook the fact that one of the reasons why he doesn't do those big movies is because he hates people.
Yes.
He doesn't want to deal with fucking executives. It seems
like he's not hiring. He wants to hire another composer, but is he going to get along with that person? Probably not.
Right. Hey, give me that. I'll show you what to do.
Yeah, he's just like, he famously dislikes people, and that's one of the reasons why it's just like, the new Halloween stuff. He's just like, whatever, give me all the money. Here's a score, and he like just doesn't care. Like.
And it's a control thing for him. He doesn't trust anyone else. He doesn't want to have to collaborate with anyone else, as much of it as he can do on his own.
I guess, well, I'm sort of waiting for, and we obviously haven't reached it yet, like what the breaking point's going to be where he is working on a bigger scale and realizes like, oh, I can't fucking...
Well,
I hate these people.
Yeah, but I don't know. I mean, it's like, The Thing is the movie where he gets a shot at a bigger scale for the first time, and it's arguably his masterpiece, and it's a flop, and Universal's like, well, no more studio films for you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. April, how do you feel about Carpenter in general? Like, is Carpenter one of your guys, or like, is it more of a mixed bag for you? Like, is this is the movie you picked when I threw his sort of filmography at you? Is this a favorite for you?
And we asked you early, so I mean, like the majority of the films were open.
Yeah, you had a lot of choice.
Yeah, no one talks about it, so I was just like, fuck it, like no one's going to talk about this. I think for me, I love his kind of scrappy resourcefulness, and I sometimes am just like, oh man, Carpenter's overrated or whatever. But the thing is, he's not. Sometimes the things, when people kind of reach back into horror stuff and they just want to try to imitate, I think that, so often they go for Carpenter. And sometimes I think they're just imitating the wrong things from him that like kind of made him so different from other filmmakers. Like it's like kind of hard for people to identify and imitate, even if they're like trying to do like a score like his or something like that. There's just some kind of piece of him that is partially like his attitude of just like, he kind of hates people. His morality is really fucked up because of that. And I'm constantly, I love morality tales, which I think is probably one of the reasons why I gravitate towards, horror and genre, because there's just so much of that. And it's just really hard to pick apart exactly how he feels about things, other than that, like, you can't really trust people. And like, there's going to be a lot of sins of the past. And like, it's just a lot of kind of random violence that feels fairly realistic, even if it's like in his weird, heightened, surreal, sensationalist kind of tone. I just feel like he has such a great handle on humanity that other filmmakers just miss, because they're so obsessed with trying to get like the Halloween killer. And I'm like, that's not what makes him special. It's these other things that people just, they don't pay attention to as much. So I'm a pretty big fan. And in fact, Prince of Darkness was a really, really big influence on our Black Christmas remake. Ooh. Which is, of course, one of the things that like people don't really like talk about Prince of Darkness, and they're not really. But also, like, I think it's a great movie. Maybe not a lot of other people do. But
we both have not seen it, and it's like one of the exciting things about the series is getting to that one. Yeah,
it is ridiculous. There are so many monologues and so much strange shit happening in this church that like with like this totem kind of thing that is essentially like the Antichrist that's in a green goo in a church basement,
And that's like Pleasance as the lead, right?
Right. That's Pleasance going wild too, like later Pleasance.
Yes. Yeah.
Later.
Pleasance. Yeah. You so many monologues, you guys. I fucking love it. Where you just get like actors who know how to act, and
that's so exciting.
Is it Halloween 4 or 5 where Danielle Harris was like, he was a really nice man, but like he stank of bourbon, and like so much of it was him, which is right around the same time as Prince of Darkness. Like so much of his performance is him like leaning in and yelling at like this little girl. And she's like, he was totally pleasant to me. I realized later, like, oh, that's like bourbon on his breath. Yeah.
I'm just thinking about like he had the darkest eyes, the devil's eyes, where it's like he had the foulest breath, the bourbon's breath.
Yeah.
Like just staring off into the distance, haunted, describing Pleasance's breath.
We'll have time to talk Pleasance
right.
as we go on.
We'll go to Pleasanceville. Yeah, two things I want to say off of what you said, April. One is which these are two quotes on the Wikipedia. One is from what's it called? Shock Value, the Jason Zinoman book. About when Dan O'Bannon saw the film, he thought it was disgusting, and he told Carpenter that he thought that the kind of coolness through which he depicted the cruelty and the violence of the movie was reflective of his casual disregard for humanity. and vice versa, his disregard for humanity had been reflected in how Carpenter had treated O'Bannon during Dark Star.
Sure. There's an axe he's grinding in that criticism.
Right. And his O'Bannon's quote was, his disdain for human beings would be serviced if he could make a film without people in it.
Damn.
I mean...
I think Dan's being, because like I feel like Carpenter's answer to most of that would be like, yeah, I do
people
have a bit of a right, yeah, and then O'Bannon's like, and it's because you're a jerk. Give me my 50% of like I don't know, like I God love Dan O'Bannon. He's just a crank,
But it's two cranks.
It's two
They're
cranks.
too correct. Too much crank energy when they're together. That's right. That's why they could never work again.
And we're not talking about Jason Statham shit. No.
No. Although it is high voltage when the two of them are in the same room. Yeah, or were R.I.P. The other thing here was, and I don't have the direct quote here, but it's apparently in one of the commentary tracks the Carpenter's done for some release of this. But he explicitly said, like, my whole conceptualization for the gang is to code them more as like zombies or vampires or ghouls. That I didn't want them to behave like humans. I wanted them to have a bare minimum of dialogue, and even their like very slow, methodical, but kind of stilted movements. I want them to feel weirdly supernatural. And whether or not it's to be literally interpreted that way, he wants to make them feel inhuman and closer to some sort of mindless horde of monsters that we're used to seeing in these movies.
Yeah. It reminded me actually of like that British movie Psychomania, of like the motorcycle gang who they kill themselves to live forever. And
Cool.
they just like, they torment the small British village on their motorcycles with their leather jackets. They're just a gang that won't die. And it just reminded me of that. So in my head too, it's like they're either vampires or they're like this like psycho gang.
Psychomania,
from Psychomania
is George Sanders' last film?
Yeah, I think so.
That is bizarre.
It's a beautiful film.
Wow, I need
Do
to see
not watch
this.
it when you've like gotten far too stoned. I can tell you that.
Noted. Yeah, it's interesting because like talking about Carpenter, right, and his necessary scrappy resourcefulness, right? Because I he said like, I thought Dark Star was going to be a calling card. No one called. The only thing I could get hired to do was write spec scripts. I wrote scripts that were small. I talked them into letting me direct one, but I was going to get a bare minimum budget. And most of the financing through this was like acquired through like parents of friends. Like he was like, I got very lucky that I knew rich kids in college and was able to sort of talk them into giving me a very limited amount of money for this movie. But when he started writing this, it was a straight Western. He was like, I want to make my Hawks Western. I want to make my Rio Bravo homage. It's going to take place in the Old West. This movie would not be as good if it took place in the Old West. It would feel, in my mind, more like just an obvious Hawks pastiche.
Right, it would
rather
feel
than,
like a total remakey kind of thing.
right,
Yeah.
rather than him turning into his own thing in the same way where it's like the fact that he probably, not that I'm implying he wanted to, but that he probably couldn't have afforded to make this gang literal monsters, but instead has human beings act like zombies, gives it so much more power, you know?
Well, I mean, I think it could have been good and different if it was Old West, if he kept the kind of like nighttime aspect and made them some kind of monsters. I think
sure,
it'd be great. But
sure.
it reminds
a good
me of that
point. Yeah.
movie Gargoyle, which is a TV movie that came out in the late 70s. And it has some kind, there's like it's contemporary, but you're in a kind of like Old West desert kind of thing feeling. And there's like these gargoyles that are attacking, trying to get the skeleton of one of their own back from this like roadside museum.
But that's like 500% the thing he was never going to get the budget to do, which is like, oh, it's the Old West and it has makeup.
Yeah, that's just not possible, unfortunately. But yeah, we can always imagine that they're vampires. Like, that's great. That's
Right.
neat. I like that.
The design of gargoyles looks insane. Stan Winston did this?
Yeah.
This is Are you looking at this creature, David?
I am. Yeah. It's fun. It's like almost a friendly kid character, if you know what I mean, because it's got like these kind of like eyes and this the big brow. I could almost see liking the gargoyle.
Well, the gargoyle is played by Bernie Casey.
Bernie Casey,
and
right?
I do like him then.
Yeah.
He's great. He's actually, I mean, he turns out to be like a kind of character who you're just like, yeah, absolutely. Give back the skeleton of the gargoyle. Why would you keep that?
David, shut up quickly, please. I have to do a solo ad read. Not my choice. You decide to go on vacation. So I want to proselytize quickly about a recent weight loss technique that I employed. It is having my gallbladder removed. I decided to lose some weight by taking out the internal organs that were failing me. Now it's pretty drastic measure that was the result of drastic circumstances and few options in between. But that came out of 4 months where I had a very restrictive diet and I couldn't eat anything. So I don't recommend this for people. That's my point. It didn't really work for me all that well. It was dramatic and painful. So I think it's probably better if you find your own health plan, a way to get healthier with maybe a psychology-based approach to change your mindset for good. I'm talking about Noom. You probably saw this coming, but I'm talking about Noom because it can be overwhelming to find a way to feel healthier because all of the different equipment and programs and supplements the wellness industry can throw at us. Well, there's no need to try to take on a whole mountain of wellness at once. Just start wherever you are. And with Noom, you'll take a path towards better health one step at a time. Their psychology-based approach helps you change your mindset rather than demanding a whole new lifestyle. Like, I started using Noom when my gallbladder was trying to turn me into the Joker. And I used it to help me get on a better diet that would not flare up that dastardly organ. And it helped me. It helped me a lot. I got healthier. I got in better shape. As suddenly my body wasn't constantly in pain. The gallbladder pain was there, but then I realized, like, oh, this is what it feels like if you don't just funnel garbage into your body at all times. If you don't exclusively eat foods that have cartoon characters on the packaging. And it changed my physical operation, and it changed my mental outlook. And now post gallbladder removal, I've kept up a lot of these good habits that Noom taught me because I've seen the light. A healthier life doesn't mean sticking to someone else's strict rules. It means having more knowledge to build smarter, more sustainable habits. And Noom's cognitive behavioral approach focuses on why instead of what to help you change your relationship with food. Everybody's journey looks different. Noom customizes a program for you based on your personal goals. 80% of Noom users finish the program, and over 60% have stuck with their goals for at least a year. With Noom, taking care of your health is empowering instead of stress-inducing. Lord knows I need no further stress-inducing elements in my life. So there's no need to fear ruining the whole program with one off day. Noom will help you get back on track. All you need is 10 minutes a day. Noom fits into your life on your terms. No grueling, early mornings, or huge chunks out of your day. Two things I hate. So if you want to start building better habits for healthier long-term results, sign up for your trial at noom.com/check. That's NOOM.com/check. Also, I highly recommend getting your gallbladder removed. Noom's not going to recommend that, so I want to go on the record and say it's great. The scripts he writes post Darkstar are Eyes, which becomes Eyes of Laura Mars, Blood River, which almost got made with John Wayne and Elvis Presley. I think we talked about this, but then that movie never comes to fruition. Black Moon Rising, which becomes a Tommy Lee Jones vehicle much later. Escape from New York City,
right,
which then becomes Escape from New York. And this are sort of that initial burst where he's just really prolific writing stuff, hoping someone will let him direct one of them.
Yes, this was called Siege. Obviously, the movie takes place in Precinct 9, but I guess they just thought 13 sounded cooler.
It does.
In the movie, it's 9.
It was Precinct 9, District 13.
Right. I think they may have tagged that on to be like, I mean, Assault on Precinct 13 is a great title. Like, I am not. Assault on Precinct 9 sounds like a fucking bag of dog shit. I don't want to watch that movie.
Can I tell you guys another secret?
Please.
Of course.
So I have a problem like seeing and comprehending numbers sometimes. Is like I had a hard time writing 3s and 5s for a long time. Like numbers are just like hard for me to comprehend in a way that other people can, like on a page or something, or just in my head. So Assault on Precinct, I have never not had to look up what number it is. I can't
Really?
remember numbers. I can't there's it's almost like a blank spot in my head. So I've always had to look up which number it is, even though I love this movie, which is wild because I'll be like in the middle of like talking to someone like you and just be like Assault on Precinct. And then I just have to pause and then I have to like Google.
I have a little of that, but I don't know if I have it to that degree. I mean, I obsessively remember box office numbers, but then will flip basic numbers all the time in anything.
Sure.
Most
Like
times
your
I
bank
have
account.
my bank account, certainly, but also most times I have moved into a new apartment. I sign up for stuff with the wrong apartment number because I can't remember where I live. Like that's an ongoing issue with me.
Sure.
You just have to write it on your hand, I think, for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
do a
just
memento.
I had an apartment I lived in for 2 years where all my mail went to my next door neighbor and she had to keep on bringing it over to me.
Very annoying. That sounds like a
Because-
real Griffin move.
Yeah, it does. And I was very confused because I think I was living in apartment 22 and I was like, well, do I live in 22 or 23? Which one is me and which one's the B? I'm not joking here. I was genuinely getting confused as to which apartment I lived in as opposed to the B in 23. That's how my brain works.
I'm reading some quotes here from Carpenter where he's like grumpy about like, look, of course it's Rio Bravo, but I'm not copying Rio Bravo. The only shot I copy is the shotgun being tossed, which is from Red River, not Rio Bravo. And then, but then he's like these quotes that are that JJ and Nick are digging up are so good. Where he just kind of monologues and then he's like, a lot of directors like, well, De Palma virtually copy movie. Like, he's like a lot of directors that he clearly is like, you know what? I'm just going to say Brian De Palma.
Bogdanovich, he was ragging on Bogdanovich too.
Right,
it's like, De Palma's just straight up doing Hitchcock. Bogdanovich is doing like Wells and shit,
And Hitchcock and John Ford and like all all these guys obviously are the sort of worshiping the old auteurs and all that.
This is such a brutal quote. He says Bogdanovich copies too. He wants to make movies about old movies to say, hey, look at me. I have good taste. I love Hawks. I love Ford. I love Hitchcock. Isn't that great?
Look, this is the best thing about covering Carpenter. So he's a salty old bitch, even in 1978 when he's a salty young bitch, but he's
kind of hated all of his contemporaries.
Right. He's grumpy about everyone. And then he's like, why doesn't anyone want to work with me? Give me $40 million. Like, it's like, but I think I agree with you, Griffin, that like it's better that this isn't a Western because it just reflects his view of like late 70s society.
Yeah.
In a way that must have just been insanely resonant, even though obviously this movie's so over the top. But it's the same with Halloween. Like Halloween is a movie about like feeling unsafe in the suburbs, right? Like how like you think, everything is fine here because here we all are in the suburbs, right? And like we all fled here. And then it's like, well, yeah, except anyone can just open the fucking door. And like this too just kind of feels like, yeah, there's just people out there who are soulless monsters who'll shoot a child through her ice cream cone.
It's the first death. It's so good.
It's so good.
I mean, it's so bananas. And I knew that this movie had a child getting shot before I saw it. Like that was like, I think the first thing I ever knew about this
That's
movie.
the famous thing. That's this movie's legacy is like he shot a girl in the chest and thus John Carpenter's career was made.
But it is like, it's one of those things where it's coming. And then when it happens, you're like, Mike, that's like, God, I can't believe he did that.
It also, you watch it and you're like, I still feel like you're not allowed to do that. Like,
no,
it feels totally right, jarring and bracing and aggressive.
So something I read about that was that he got an X rating.
Yeah, he got an X rating, and then the rumor is he took it out and then just put it back in, right? Is that what you're
Yeah. But just so crazy. Like, I mean, he pulled it off, and I guess at this point, whatever, it's fine, right? Like,
well, it feels like nothing was centralized back then, right? Like movies are still coming out like in dribs and drabs, and the MPA exists, but it's maybe not cracking the whip as much. I don't know. Again, all of this stuff feels. I mean, April, what do you think of the first kill? There's the kill. There's the action scene.
Yeah, the opening sort of assault. Yeah,
but this crazy sort of death sequence, or should we talk about earlier stuff? I don't know.
Well, I was just going to say, one other thing, I guess, before we sort of get into it is like, in his crankiness, he was like, well, my vision for this was it was going to cost $5 million and I was going to have big stars in it. And April, you were talking about just sort of like the interplay and the character dynamics and how much you want to kind of like live in the interpersonal stuff in a Carpenter movie. And it is a thing that I think doesn't make him unique, but is like such an advantage he has over a lot of other genre filmmakers, where a lot of them you can tell they actually don't really care about the human characters that much, right?
Yeah.
I don't want to paint with a broad brush here, but I feel like there are a lot of even well-liked, and certainly this goes even more so for a lot of the crappier sort of like genre films of the time, where it's like, well, what they really want is this. They're thinking about the set pieces, they're thinking about the monsters, they're thinking about their clever conceit, and this is like the chuffa killing time, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
And you watch a movie like this where he's not dealing with any movie stars, and the actors in this go on to varying levels of success, but it's not like he discovers a Jamie Lee Curtis in this cast who then becomes, of course, we knew, she was going to be around for decades. But every performance is so good. Every dialogue exchange is interesting. It feels like it works just on like a dramatic and comedic level on its own without the sort of like, mousetrap construction of this whole thing around it. And he got that like the ultimate production value is having a good performance in frame. Like that's going to make your movie feel more expensive than anything else. And likewise, a crappy performance can derail whatever production value you do have on screen behind it.
The thing is, like, he's not dealing with big movie stars, but he is dealing with stage actors. These are like trained stage actors. If you look at the guy who plays Wells, who tries to escape through the tunnel to help them, like the convict, he's played by Tony Burton, and Tony Burton was, you can hear it in his enunciation, you can hear it in the kind of like projection of his voice and the way that he's a trained theater actor. But he was also just like the perfect person to cast because he had actually spent 3 years in prison prior to this and found acting through that.
Right. And he also spends time as a heavyweight boxer. So he's like got that physicality. He famously then becomes Duke in all the Rocky movies. That's like his legacy as right. He's Apollo's corner man who then kind of becomes part of Rocky's corner as well. Yeah.
But this was like his big break, essentially.
Yes.
This movie.
100%.
So it's a really great thing to see.
He's also really good. You actually feel his death, kind of.
Yes.
Yeah. So I do think that, there are, even though they're not like breakout stars, I do think that there's a kind of showcasing of these actors who didn't get a lot of chance to have much dialogue or screen time because they're day players on TV shows and things. And so I just really like that he got to just work with actors who want to act. Like they're not there to be the starring vehicle,
And also, it doesn't feel like anyone is looking down on this material, because sometimes I find that too is like I'll watch some 70s horror genre movie and there's a performance that feels kind of like sloppy. And then you look the person up and you're like, they were classically trained. Is it just that they didn't give a shit, that they think this thing's beneath
is like
them?
A tossed off, right? Yeah,
right. And I think partly it's that Carpenter had more respect for his actors than a lot of those directors did, and he's giving them better material. And I think he's finding the right people. And I don't say the fact that no one in this went on to become a movie star in a derisive way, because I think you watch this, you're like, everyone in this movie should have had a much better career after this. Like everyone's kind of giving a movie star performance, and it's more impressive to see this in a film that didn't have a $5 million budget where he was able to plug in pre-existing stars and then would have had to reckon with their personas. He's like taking people who are largely unknown to you and making them feel like iconic stars before your very eyes.
But they feel like real people too, which probably is partly that their faces that I mostly associate with this movie. So obviously that's part of it. But like,
but like Darwin Jostin, that's a fucking movie star performance. You're like, this guy fucking rules.
He's terrific. And I mean, this is also a movie where the last 2 minutes, you almost like tack on an extra star because you're like, holy shit, it ends so perfectly. And he's got that line and like, but you know what I mean, Griff? Like it is a movie star performance, but like the whole motley crew element of the plot is very helped by that. It really does feel like these are just like a bunch of, guys off the street, like who are getting thrown together.
You don't have preconceived notions about these people. It's not going to skew your understanding of who wins, who makes it out of this movie alive. Like
if Darwin Justin was Kurt Russell, I'd be like, okay, so this is the guy I have to lock in with or whatever. Right. Right. Not that no offense to Kurt Russell, obviously.
No, but I do think it's to this movie's advantage, especially just because this movie is so nasty, and when you get to the Kim Richards, currently a Real Housewife, I believe. Do you know this, David? The girl who gets shot is on one of the Real Housewife shows.
The little girl?
Yes.
That's crazy. Beverly Hills. She was on for several seasons of the Real Housewives of Beverly Hills.
Okay.
Yes. So she was also the kid in Escape to Witch Mountain and Return from Witch Mountain.
Oh, that's how I recognize her. Okay.
Right. And she is half sisters with Kathy Hilton.
She is. Paris Hilton is her niece.
Yes.
Wow.
Bizarre.
Okay, cool. Yeah, she married a supermarket franchise heir. And then, I don't know, it looks like she's had a pretty insane life outside of also being shot through an ice cream cone in Assault on Precinct 13.
Look, I don't watch the Housewives show. I just cannot imagine if I were watching episodes being like, and this woman is like the source of one of the most transgressive images in 70s Hollywood cinema. Yeah.
Yeah, she was like, hey, this isn't Vanilla Twist.
It's so wild.
Carpenter's take on that seems to just be like, I wanted them to be evil. Like,
right.
Like it's wait, let me find the actual line from him. It's the most absurd death I could think of. I wanted the bad guys to be bad, and if they could kill that little girl, then you can't sympathize with them. Like there's,
and Frank Doubleday is so good in that role of like the white warlord dude.
Yeah,
he's a warlord, right? That's how he's
I think that's how he's in the credits. Yeah,
he's got the crazy. He's in Escape from New York, right? He's got the crazy hair in Escape from New York. Love that guy, but yeah, he's unsettling.
Yeah.
Did you guys know that there's a documentary about Lori Zimmer and how she disappeared?
No.
The woman who plays Lee.
Right. Who I like. She's very like, frosty in a way. Wait, would she disappear? Oh my God. It's called Do You Remember Lori Zimmer? And but it seems like the answer is she just fucking like stopped working and married a guy and is a teacher. Like she just left Hollywood.
But I
think
we don't know why. I think
Okay.
it's the why she left that might be the drama. I've never seen it, but I remember hearing about it before and I was curious because she, to me, strikes me as like such a large figure in this movie, despite the fact that she gets like the least dialogue.
Right. He cut a lot of her performance out, which is weird. And I'm not sure. He said like she, he didn't like her line deliveries or something, but like she is very striking in this movie. I mean, he didn't really do her a disservice in a way because I do, her performance lingered with me, but it is weird that she's sort of in and out.
She also weirdly, like she has the energy of like a high status dame from like a Howard Hawks comedy, you know?
Like Lauren Bacall is what I was the vibe I was getting from her.
Her classy broad.
Her look is so striking because she has these kind of like permanently arched eyebrows and then these very heavy eyes and all this eyeshadow. So it kind of just looks like she's constantly like dismissive of everything happening around her.
Yeah.
Like she's a little bit above it, looking a little askance at everything. And every time she does talk, it's impactful. Like I like her line readings, but it also, there is more power in the fact that she is kind of silent for a lot of the movie.
Yeah.
You're just sort of trying to read her. Yeah, she has like 3 other credits, one of which is a French short film, and her last acting job's 1979. She has like a 3-year career.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah.
So
yeah, it's odd.
I am curious. I do want to know.
I'm curious, Lori.
Well, like Darwin Justin, I was like, how did this guy not become at the very least like a cult figure? How is he not in like 20 more movies like this? He largely became a teamster. He was working as an actor, and then he was taking teamster jobs as like transpo captain in between jobs to keep getting paid. And then he was like, I don't know, this teamster thing's kind of working out for me. I'm going to turn down acting jobs because this is like steady work. And then he just stopped going up for shit. And he has like scattered credits for the remaining 20 years. He dies in 1998, but he's got like steady credits for 2 decades just as like transpo captain and driver and shit. He just became a full-time teamster who would occasionally moonlight as an actor.
He's funny, which is crucial without like, trying to be funny or, he doesn't feel like he's giving this sort of arch performance at all, but he's natural. He's earthy. He
reminds me of like a greaser version of Lee Van Cleef. Like he's got that kind of odd steeliness, but there's sort of this like sardonic humor to him. Yeah, everything's so casual. He's got the sort of like narrow eyes and the pinched face and all of that. Right, he does this. He's in Eraserhead the following year, which was famously a long shoot. Right, he's got a small part in The Fog. And then it's like he pretty much starts being a transpo guy and does some occasional TV appearances after that. But like he's a driver for the Buddy Holly story 2 years after this movie. And then it's like, oh, he's transpo captain for Down and Out in Beverly Hills. Like, April, I'm sure you've experienced this as well. His last credit was as a driver for The American President, the Rob Reiner movie.
Yeah.
Now, April, I'm sure you've experienced this. You work on a movie set. There are actors. There are cool. There are people who are movie stars. But I feel like there's always on every single set some crew person who is somehow more charismatic and elusive and movie star-esque than any of the people who've actually been hired to be movie stars. Like there's some old grip with like a leather face who's constantly got a cigarette dangling from his mouth where you're like, this is the most compelling guy I've ever seen. I want to know his life story. Can you imagine if you're on the set of The American President and you're like, this guy is so fucking compelling. Why isn't he a movie star? And then you realize he was the star of John Carpenter's breakout movie. He caught a fucking shotgun without flinching and shot it in a half second. And now he's fucking driving Annette Bening around.
I mean, honestly, you should always look for the quiet old people on crew.
Absolutely. The coolest people I've ever witnessed in my life are quiet old people on film crews.
I mean, they've seen some shit and they're there to get the paycheck,
Yes. Yeah, they're all business. They're like this character where they're like, I don't know, you have a smoke? Yeah. You need me to shoot my way out of this? Fine. As long as the check clears. Like everything's like, it's a living. They have like custom gloves that they've made, tattoos that you cannot decipher.
That's like when we were talking to our New Zealand crew on Black Christmas, like the line producer that we brought in, she's like retired. But then I like went out to lunch with her and she's like, she's Jane Campion's producer. She literally only comes out of retirement unless she like really needs it or if Jane Campion's making something. And then like, that's who she is. And you're just like, oh, okay. And she's like, oh, also I did all of Xena. And I was like, of course he did all of Xena, but
that is wild.
But she's just Jane Campion's right-hand woman for everything that she does. And I was just like, okay, that's, that's a huge thing. That's very big. And you're doing this movie. Why? Like, what the fuck?
This is like my strongest advice for anyone who listens to this show and wants to work in like film and TV production. If you are lucky enough to ever find yourself on a set, talk to fucking everybody. Like you just meet the most interesting people. And that person who's quiet off in the corner, you're just like, that's what you fucking did? Those are your credits? Or that's what your life was before you suddenly at the age of 50 became this? Like there's this weird high level carny aspect to film production. And I think especially with movies like this, like sort of weird scrappy genre movies where like just fascinating people convene in the middle of the woods to make a thing for 6 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And also there's something sort of ghostly and creepy about how this movie takes place in the middle of nowhere. Because you're like, where is this? Like what police precinct is just like out, sort of beyond civilization or wherever this is supposed to be. Like I love how vague everything is in that regard.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just so great as a setup to have it be like, here's this guy who fashions himself as some kind of good cop hero. He's been on the job for 4 hours and they're like, here's your promotion. You got to like take the night shift in a place that's closing tomorrow morning. Like, it's just the crappiest job, but also the perfect setup for this kind of film, you know? Like the remake, which I did not rewatch, although it's also on HBO Max right now. And I saw it when it came out and I remember liking okay. But I feel like that's very much set up on there's a snowstorm. They're locked in. The roads are closed. Like it's that kind of like, it's almost
There's
a cabin in the woods kind of element to like, you're lost in the middle of nowhere. This just feels like no one gives a shit. This place is like a void.
But that was Los Angeles. Like Los Angeles at a certain time was like still just like the Wild West that was undeveloped for like places where like it was pretty easy to dump dead bodies just all over. I read this book about like Los Angeles's geography based upon like where you could dump dead bodies because of like certain things, like neighborhoods were just better for it because there was so much space.
There are tar pits, like there were places you could utilize.
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff around here where God, even when I first moved out here in 2004, I just remember being like, there's still just a lot of open space here. Now it's all developed. Like it's very different even just from like 2004, but like I just can't imagine in the 1970s just like how much desolation there was within the city, which made this place extremely special. Of like you could be alone with yourself and your thoughts and like kind of scary, but also inside one of the biggest major cities of the world.
Well, LA is also just so fucking big that it's like kind of a misnomer treating it as a city because it's really like 20 different cities.
Yeah, that we've swallowed up. Yeah.
Right. There's just been this sort of acquisitions and mergers where it's like each neighborhood in LA is kind of a city on its own that you're just like, no, it's just that's part of the same thing here. But you also think about like the time this movie is made and new Hollywood is rising and you've had decades of, well, LA is where most of the American films are made, but they're made on sound stages. And if they're shooting exteriors, there are very set places where exteriors happen. You know, you're either controlled in a built set or you're going to Monument Valley or whatever it is, but it's like in this period of time, filmmakers are going like, why don't we just shoot on that block? That's not a block that anyone has filmed before. And the fact that it is underdeveloped does give it some weird cinematic quality, not because we're not trying to dress it up as something else or use it as a generic backdrop that can fill in for anything.
Yeah.
You're kind of owning the eeriness of what is or isn't there.
And like showing it, Carpenter, I think, showed a lot of what LA was in this in a weird way. And in the bus scene, for instance, when they're transporting, the bus is driving. It's not being towed.
Right.
And you can tell because of the patching of the sound when they cut to a close up from a mid two shot. The bus is driving. They have no control of the sound or the background or anything. And like when the guy's driving the car, like the cop in the beginning, there's like someone who keeps looking over, like like this person that keeps catching up with him on the street, and she keeps looking over into the window, like being like, are they shooting a movie? Like you can tell like that's not controlled. There's like, there's like not permits happening here is what I'm saying. They're just showing people driving around in Los Angeles and the streets and all of that.
Well, yeah, there's another thing from the commentary where he said like, my philosophy for this movie, which I believe, I'm paraphrasing here, but he was like, my philosophy for Assault, which I believe you can apply to any low budget film, is to shoot as little footage as possible and extend the scenes for as long as you can. And there is sort of that weird power to like, you're watching this movie, and for a lot of those sequences, like the bus thing you were saying, you're like, he maybe had one take of this, like maybe two. These scenes do not have complicated coverage. Even when you're getting into like the bigger shootouts with a lot of characters, he's so good at sort of like, and part of this is resourcefulness, but I also think it is that he like considers himself a classicist, in terms of filmmaking. And he was thinking that all these guys like De Palma were too flashy. We're doing too much. We're cutting too quick. That like the sequence that I find eeriest in this movie is when it's the gang just very quietly in the car, all loading their guns.
Yes.
While the theme plays. And it goes on for like a minute.
But all those weird scenes, like the blood scene right at the start too, where you're like,
yes,
so much
what is
blood.
this? Like what?
Like that is the most blood oath I've ever seen.
It's not a drop.
No.
It's a bowl.
Yeah.
And they have this nice crystal bowl of blood.
But even before
It's
the
like
bowl
literally
comes
someone's
out,
grandma's bowl.
Oh,
Exactly. They were like, let's use this, I guess. I love that they like never talk.
Right. But that's like, even before they take the bowl out, I feel like there is a full minute of just a master shot of 4 guys sitting around a room, sticking knives into their arms. And you're like, what's happening? Why is this not being explained to me? Why are they not acknowledging each other?
It's on the poster, right? It says like the gang that swore a blood oath to destroy like every cop in Precinct 13 or whatever. Like, you know, that's part of the sell is that these guys are going to do whatever they can.
The other tagline in this movie.
Blood oath. Yeah. What is it?
The other tagline on this movie, which is incredible, is a white hot night of hate.
Hey, that is pretty good.
But yeah, I mean, the opening of this movie is like a classic kind of drawn out Carpenter credit sequence where it's just kind of very striking, big, colorful letters with this ominous score that the longer it goes on, the more unsettling it becomes. It just kind of incredibly repetitive and quietly building and increasingly unnerving. And then, right, from there you go to the first sort of ambush, right? Like where it's like pitch black, so dark, hard to make out anything that's happening. Another thing I've appreciated watching all these Carpenter movies is like now I feel like things are fucked with digitally so much. There's such a heavy digital intermediate on most movies. And I think to some degree now, even more so, they like will often color time films and such so that they play okay on phones and shittier devices. And then you watch a thing like this and you're like, this has like actual blacks in it. It doesn't have sort of like milky grays. Like there's just like darkness in the shadows of the movie, like a real density there. In this opening sequence, it's hard to orient yourself around what's going on. But not because it's sloppy, because it's sort of, I don't know, mysterious.
Yeah, it was processed correctly.
Right.
Which is something that he knew from the beginning, is that you spend the money on the camera and the processing. Again, the same thing with sound. And that's what you get when you, like certain things, like when I watch The Fog again, The Fog has the best kind of blacks in it. Same thing with Halloween, the best blacks. He just knew how to do that. And very few people, and especially when you're working with digital, very few people actually know how to shoot these things correctly, which is really frustrating if you're in the horror genre.
Bring. Oh, David, I'm sorry to interrupt. Hold on one second. I just want to take this, let's see, this call. Someone is Zoom bombing us. Let's click. Okay, and it's the Cineast Cow. And we know how this goes, and I'm just going to breeze over it. It's the Cineast Cow. She represents Mubi, a great streaming service where you have hand-picked movies, hand-picked cinema. It's like the farm to table of streaming services. You know this is going to be thoughtfully prepared and cultivated straight to your table. It's a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. And every day, Mubi premieres a new film from iconic directors to emerging auteurs. There is something always new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected, as I said. It's like a personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. You know all of this. They've been a sponsor forever. So let's just do the thing that people like, which is I go onto the homepage and I see what they have. What do we got here? Mubi releases. This is a thing we barely even talk about. Mubi is distributing films. A lot of times now you go onto Deadline, you read about some hot festival favorite, and Mubi is the one who purchased them. They're going straight to Mubi. You have Four Roads by Alice Rocker. That's a new film. Mateus and Maxime, the Xavier Dolan film. All Hands on Deck. Family Romance LLC, a new Herzog documentary. These are just some of the new things that are available not just on Mubi, but exclusively on Mubi. What else do we have here? We have Ran. We have Ran, the Akira Kurosawa movie. We have Once Upon a Time in Anatolia. I think David mentioned previously that they seem to have a lot of Nuri Bilge Ceylan films, a filmmaker I like a lot. Tom Anderson, Los Angeles Plays Itself. That's a documentary about the use of Los Angeles as a filming location in movies, both when it's actually used as itself and how often it is forced to double for other locations. It's a great documentary that was impossible to watch for a very long period of time legally because it uses footage from so many other movies. But now you can watch it on Mubi. That's all you need to know, okay? So if you want to try Mubi free for 30 days, you go to Mubi.com/check. That's MUBI.com/check for a whole month of great cinema for free. That's Mubi.com/check. I know I didn't use you much in this ad read, Cineast Cal, but I really feel like the bit has gotten thin and we all know where it's going and there's not that much you can contribute. Fine. What's your joke? If you want to share a joke, we can do that. That's a way to end this ad read. Who's there? Interrupting cow who. See, it doesn't work if you take the pause after I say who's there. You have to interrupt who's. This is why I didn't work you into the ad read. Go to Mubi.com/check. It's MUBI.com/check for a whole month of great cinema for free. We recorded our episode of The Fog already, but I want to bring this up here because I forgot to say it in that episode. The thing that blows my mind about the cinematography in The Fog is that he has these really, really dark, pure blacks. He's using shadows a lot, right? But every actor's face is always incredibly well lit. And it somehow doesn't come off as some overly stylized, like Morticia Adams. Oh, we put a key light here, but the rest of it's in shadow. There's something somehow organic about it. I mean, it's Dean Cundey, who's like a genius and arguably had a greater influence on the next 30 years of popular cinema and their look than anyone else.
Mhm.
But it's like a magic trick, that movie, where you're like, every face is perfectly lit, so you're seeing the expressiveness of the actor, and the rest of the shot is cloaked in mystery.
I mean, some of it is a magic trick, like when the priest kind of comes out of the shadows, that's like,
Yes.
that's actually like
sure.
a plate, like that's like, editing technique of just like, they couldn't hide him. So they made their own blacks, like they did their own, effects on it. But, Dean Cundey's work on that, God, I kind of wish that he was shooting this, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I wish he'd done like 10 movies with Carpenter, but whatever. I mean, he obviously, his legacy is so extraordinary.
Even like his work going back to like, I'm obsessed with The Witch Who Came from the Sea. Partially because he's like this uncredited DP on it, but it's like, you start to see like his genius pretty early on of like his framing and sense of light and darkness that is just, unmatched.
I'm seeing here in his IMDb, and who knows if this is true or not, that he's shooting the Boba Fett TV show.
It does say that. I don't know. I mean,
Which would
he has
be
become
very exciting for me.
It would be
Yeah.
exciting. He's in this weird kind of like, still works, but mostly on things you've kind of never heard of. Like,
And his last two major movies were Home Again and Jack and Jill.
Jack and
like,
Jill and Home Again. Yeah.
It's just odd that he's found himself in this weird, like kind of mild comedy corridor.
And he like did a couple West Wings. You know what I mean? Like, it feels like he
Right.
was just sort of like, what do you want? Like, I'll do it. Which is crazy because the first half of his career is so loaded.
Maybe he just doesn't want to do anything though.
Yeah, he might just want to vibe. We were talking about vibing earlier.
But he does still work a lot. Like, he has credits every year. A lot of them are short films, though, or it's things you haven't heard of. I also think there's this thing. I mean, it's like typecasting is such an issue throughout the industry, even when you get to people behind the camera, and above the line crew, where you look at him and you're like, oh, he shoots Who Framed Roger Rabbit, right? And that's this like absolutely astonishing masterwork of cinematography. And he's like redefining all of these sort of tricks and tools for how you integrate two different elements in the same shot. And then like after that, obviously he does the Back to the Future sequels. He does Hook, like he's doing other things, but then it's sort of like, oh, he's become the default guy if you want to put an animated character in a movie. So interspersed with like Apollo 13 and shit, Death Becomes Her, then it's like, well, Jurassic Park, of course Spielberg's bringing him on because he's going to be sort of pioneering all this new CGI stuff. And then he does Casper, then he does Flubber, then he does Looney Tunes Back in Action and Garfield, you know? And now you're at this point where he's made Garfield, and it's like, well, I don't know. He's the guy who made Garfield. Why would we hire him to make our big movie?
Because he fucking Jurassic Park. Get out of here.
But I'm talking about the stupidity of this industry where they're like, well, what's he done lately? If he did Garfield, then I guess we should hire him to do Jack and Jill. And it's like, no, he did Garfield because he did Jurassic Park. You lunatics.
Well, who knows? Right. I don't know. I mean, then maybe that's why Jon Favreau or whoever is like, what's Dean Cundy doing? You know, call him up. I don't know.
Right. But you're like 2010, he's doing a Scooby-Doo made for TV movie.
Jesus, I'm going to try to hire him for my next thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, what are you doing, Dean?
Scooby-Doo Curse of the Lake Monster. And you just have to imagine where they're like, oh, there's this guy who's good at filming movies with CGI characters. You mean Dean Cundy?
He seems like I don't know, he looks like a friendly fella.
He looks really friendly. I find him kind of adorable.
Yeah. Yeah, he's got kind of a sort of lovable uncle vibe. Big white beard.
He seems nice, though. Like, he actually does seem nice.
Interviews with him, he seems like a very kind, unpretentious man.
He's not like a Sonnenfeld, you know what I mean? Like,
yes.
Right.
He's not like a showboat. This film is well shot, though.
Yeah, it's shot by Douglas Knapp, we talked about on the Dark Star episode. This is basically
who was sort of his early guy. Yeah.
Those are the only two. He also did the first nudie musical. That's it. Those are the only movies he worked on. And then, as we mentioned, he weirdly has like a bunch of Star Trek Voyager credits and stuff like that. He's a camera operator for most of his career.
Good for him.
Yeah,
Just make the paycheck and not deal with asshole shit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But this movie's great. I mean, like I watched the Shout Factory, you know, the nice Blu-ray that they have, and it looks fantastic, you know, obviously, but you know, so it's emphasizing it, but this is a great looking movie. I would like to see it in a theater, you know, on like a grimy old print. Like, it does feel like that'd be fun, but you know, their restoration is very nice.
It's also one of those movies where you feel like if you saw this at a rep theater, it would still get gasps at several moments.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you're not watching it as like a curio or like, oh, this is an interesting time capsule of an early career. It's a movie that still feels very visceral. I mean, you go from, the opening sort of ambush, right? To then, I think right after that is the weird blood scene, the blood bowl scene. Yep. So then when you get to the first scene with, what's his name? Our main hero, the good lieutenant.
With Austin Stoker. Ethan Bishop is the character.
Yeah, that's the name.
Right, and that's in daylight, and he's driving a car. At that point, you're unnerved by that. Like, you've gotten so used to the darkness and the silence and the eeriness of this movie that to see like a normal guy being like, yeah, I think I'm a hero, you're like, something's going to go horribly wrong here.
It's sort of a slow build after that. I mean, apart from the ice cream scene, like it's sort of I like it. It's a sort of contemplative 45 minutes until the siege really kicks off.
But that also is, I think, I mean, Halloween's different because it's relentless, right? Once it really gets going. But I feel like a Carpenter thing that you'll read like reviews of the time. Sometimes people stupidly are dismissive of him because of this, where it's like, well, he got like $1 million or $100,000 to shoot the movie, and he puts like 25% of the budget into one sequence, and the movie is 75% build up to that one sequence. You know, but I think he is kind of a master of the slow build. He doesn't make you feel like he's stalling or delaying. Everything feels cumulative, you know? And at the point where that money does end up on screen and things break, you get to a massive shootout, whatever it is, it's such a release valve. You know, he's built it up. He's blown everything up so successfully. To a breaking point.
You guys got to see Prince of Darkness, because it is like the
I can't wait.
Oh yeah,
like everything that you're saying is just kind of like the apotheosis of that kind of type of filmmaking. Just like there's so much talking and so much build up, but then like the scene that happens, you're just like, oh my god, she went through a mirror It's like fucking, yeah. The times when it hits, you're like, oh, thank God I waited for this, you know?
Well, our friend of the podcast, JD Amato, was telling me that when he was a child and he would obsessively watch like making of specials on TV, or I'm forgetting the names, but there were like some shows, I feel like they were often like syndicated weekend shows that were just like the magic of movies. And every episode would just have like, we went to this effects house and they showed us how they built this robot or this makeup. And as a kid, you maybe haven't heard of most of these movies. They're not doing segments on the biggest films. They're doing segments on movies that didn't really pan out, you know, where they got that much freedom to cover this thing behind the scenes. And then the movie sort of doesn't make an impact. And he had this visceral memory as a child of watching one of these and seeing like these incredibly bizarre, giant, incredibly detailed, gory animatronics and going like, what is this? And he didn't remember the name as a kid. And he spent like 25 years trying to, you know, every couple of months be like, what can I try Googling for to figure out what this is? And then someone posted it on like social media, the photo of it. And he was like, what is this? And he realized it was In the Mouth of Madness. And the characters are on screen for like 5 seconds. Like he couldn't find any paper trail of this because the footage of this behind the scenes is so much more comprehensive than anything you see these creatures do in the movie. And he was just kind of astounded of like, how much money did John Carpenter spend to build these humongous, like 20-foot, incredibly detailed, expressive animatronics that appear largely in shadow for one shot? But he just picks where to put the money, I think, fairly wisely.
Yes, I agree with that. Right.
And I mean, he also, I mean, like he'll just kind of ask his friends to do double duty on certain things. Like even though Deborah Hill is uncredited as a producer, she was certainly producing this movie, and she is credited as the assistant editor. She was editing this movie. Like
it's sort of all hands on deck early on, right? Like that's kind of the vibe, right?
Yeah, I mean, like she was shooting second unit for The Fog. You know, like she was doing second unit on most everything that he was doing in those early days when they were working together, because it was just so like run and gun. But
for how much Carpenter is a known crank, I do think there's something telling in the fact that like he and Deborah Hill dated and then remained such close collaborators for years after that.
Yeah, until she was like, you know what? I don't need this.
Right. But it was like he was married, you know, like, and they were still working together and very sort of creatively simpatico. Yeah.
I'm just happy they found each other at that point in time in their lives, you know, developing their own skills individually.
Isn't it right? It's partly, it's like eventually being in the Carpenter world, it's a lot of crankiness and a lot of like elbow grease even after great success, right? Like it's a lot of like you're never comfortable, I feel like, in Carpenter world.
Yeah, it kind of felt like she wanted to get the budgets. She wanted to get
she was like, come on.
Like she doesn't want to shoot second unit anymore. She wants to produce.
Right.
And a lot of these people like Dean Cundey go on to that. It's like, oh, Carpenter's a springboard to him getting to work with Spielberg and make like the biggest movies, you know, with unlimited resources.
But this is the thing we're going to keep going back to. And I'm sort of repeating myself, but right. Like, but is that just part of the magic? And I'm sorry you guys didn't get your proper budget, but it kind of worked out for the best that you had to, you know, earn every second of film. Like, I don't know.
I also think in terms of Carpenter, like getting so few opportunities to paint on that bigger canvas, we were talking about like, well, that's probably tied to him being a crank. But I think it's the two-pronged thing of like, A, he probably doesn't kiss enough ass. He doesn't know how to sort of like schmooze his way into assuring the executives that he's not going to burn their money. He's not going to mince words. He's such a straight shooter. He's so unsentimental about this shit. But I also think it's that there is that kind of innate nastiness to his films that you can only get away with under a certain budget level. Because above that, people start to go like, can someone be more likable? Can something funnier happen here? Can they have a really earnest romance, you know?
I love how unlikable everyone is. I love it. It's
they're not very nice to each other either. You know, it's grudging respect is about as good as it gets here.
Yeah. It's
And
great.
he's so unconcerned with backstory. He doesn't over-explain things. He doesn't give people these obvious sort of arcs and payoffs, you know? These things that a studio has to be like, come on, give us the razzle.
Right. And it's also,
the studios.
but like he was like, and the villains, I don't want you to be going on about like, oh, well, they're poor or there's some societal. He's like, no, I don't want this to be a message about how they've been forced into villainy or whatever. They're just villains. They're
ghouls. They're like a cosmic evil.
Exactly.
I mean, he talked a lot about how much Night of the Living Dead was an influence for him. And obviously even the setup of this of like, they're stuck in the house. This is notable along with Night of the Living Dead for being one of the only like non-blaxploitation films to have a black lead in this era, you know?
Yeah.
And you know, there are like metatextual powers that come from that, but he's not overtly making any big statement by it. Much like Night of the Living Dead, it's like hire a good actor, put him in there. It's something different than what you've seen before. And the gang feels very Romero-ish. I mean, I think I read a quote where Romero was at con with Martin the same year as this. And he knew that this guy was like influenced by his work. And he went to see the Assault on Precinct 13 screening. And then when Kim Richards gets shot, he was like, well, I'm fucked. He's the dude now. Like he just went so much further than I ever thought you could.
Then that's the story of Carpenter so often is he makes Halloween and then he's like, watches some new movie and he's like, wait, they can do this now? I gotta beat this. Like, yeah.
Right. There's a sort of one-upsmanship in horror in particular that I find really fun. You know?
Sure.
I think that it can become meaningless at some point.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I think, yes, it has to be done with meaning and intent. I don't think it's just the gore, the scale, or the shock factor, because then it becomes white noise. But I think guys like Romero and Carpenter obviously understand the semiotics of what they're doing.
Yeah.
And when that gets one-upped and they're playing with the form and audience expectations in that kind of way, not just sort of how many gallons of blood you can dump. That is exciting to kind of chart.
Although if we're talking about Sam Raimi, I do think, as I will defend him till the day I die in every single movie that he's made, that
hardcore
gallons of blood can be a great one-upsmanship move if done correctly.
Yes, he's smart. He knows what he's doing. It's not being done wantonly.
Yeah. It's like, as a kid, when I was obsessed with movies and I would read about scary movies and I would usually I imagined worse than what's in the movie, right? Usually the movies actually have a lot more restraint when you actually watch Halloween and sit down. You know, you're like, oh, this is not the gore fest I imagined when I was 10 years old. And then, you
talked about, right, as a kid that you thought these movies were literally just 90 minutes of stabbing. Like there was no plot, no dialogue. It was just blood for an entire running time.
But then there is the occasional, like you see Day of the Dead or whatever, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't actually, like Sam Raimi is probably a good example to write. You're like, I didn't actually know it was going to go this hard. Like there is the occasional reversal of that where it's actually worse than you imagine. Not usually.
But this is kind of one of them. I mean, that's the fucking little girl shot moment. Is this movie like throwing down the gauntlet and going like, we're going harder than you expect. Like it's not going to be gory, but it's going to be more intense and more ruthless than you expect.
Yes.
I mean, we're not talking about plot much here, but I mean, the plot insofar much
it's
as
three
there is one.
Threads, you know, unite at this precinct and then they have to fight everyone off. I mean,
this gang wants revenge for their members killed in the opening ambush. They're going to take it out on this precinct where this new cop is stuck manning it for its final night of operation.
Well, they're led there because the father of the daughter shoots one of the gang members and leads them sort of there. So, and his character, it's weird because I kind of understand that he has just fainted or is in some kind of state, but it is weird the whole time that he's like not passed out, but like I guess emotionally he is just like, he's so overwhelmed that he's just like catatonic now. More or less.
Yeah, it's like just outright trauma. Yeah.
Then I guess sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say the moment of him reacting to his daughter getting killed, I think is an example of like Carpenter's steady hand with performance versus a lot of other directors in this genre where like you're kind of taken aback by the stillness of he gets off the phone, he looks over, He sees this bizarre image in a wide shot. Here's a truck. There's a body next to it. What's that other body? Is that my daughter? And you sort of just hold on his face as like the recognition takes over. Versus a lot of movies like this, I think it's the second the gunshot goes off, the guy whips his head around and then falls to his knees and screams no.
Mhm.
And this is that thing where at first he's not even upset. He just looks confused, and then it's like denial, him getting slowly closer into it, realizing it's real. And then he's just sort of silently heaving on top of her body, He's not wailing. It's not guttural. It's not like yelling at the gods. It is just like his brain is short circuiting. It feels like a more realistic representation of how someone would react to this than we're used to seeing.
Not to as a father of daughter here, but as a father of a new daughter, this scene freaked me out a lot, even though my daughter is a baby, not a child.
Well, I have good advice for you, David. Never let your daughter get ice cream.
I won't. Of course not. I'll show her this movie.
Yeah. No.
Never.
No.
She can never
and that
leave
will
the house. Not
that will
even
make
as
her
a baby.
really psychologically healthy. She'll be
Right, that'll
really
be good.
strong and good and normal that way.
And anytime she complains, I'll just show her Assault on Precinct 13. That'll be a good idea, right?
Yeah.
Right. And then other kids will ask her, of course, through like a tin can radio or paper notes because she doesn't leave her home. They'll ask her, what's your favorite movie? And she goes, movie? I thought there was only one movie. It's Assault on Precinct 13, and I've seen it 800 times.
Right. It's a freaky scene. Obviously, the shock of her getting shot, but also what you're talking about, just that he doesn't let the aftermath. He doesn't cheap on that. He lingers in it.
It's cheaper though. It's cheaper to shoot. It's cheaper to shoot the actor doing all the work. You don't have
Yes.
to
That's
move.
true.
You don't have to move the camera. You don't have to do setups. You don't have to do anything else. It's just like if you just keep that shot wide for a little bit longer and then hold on this actor, you're good to go.
It's his advice. It's like the key to low budget filmmaking. I also think always letting these scenes or these shots or both play out a little bit longer than you're used to does create this odd sense of dread. You're watching everything going like anyone else would have cut 15 seconds ago.
Right. I've seen enough movies that I feel like we should be moving on, and we're not. Yes, definitely.
Yeah.
Any studio would have forced you to get coverage so that you could cut 10 times within that space. We cut too much, honestly.
Way too much.
We cut too much. It drives me insane. You can't stop it. It feels like unless you do independent film and just kind of keep in tight control of it. But yeah, we cut far too much in this country.
He doesn't seem to entirely regret the scene, but like he does say like, look, I was young and stupid. I probably wouldn't do, which is like exactly how Spielberg talks about the kid dying in Jaws, where you have these young filmmakers where they're like, yeah, I mean, I thought I was being a smartass almost, like killing a kid in Act 1. Like, how are you going to top that? And now I watch it and I'm like, all right, you sort of wince at it. But I think it's super crucial to this movie. Like, I don't think it's this.
It's this movie's
mission. The
mission
fact that
statement.
they did that, it's the mission statement. And then the fact that they're using silencers, which is so obviously there's like plot reason for it, obviously, but it's so eerie too that people are just like silently, essentially like toppling over, like exploding in blood. That
the bizarre imagery in that shootout sequences where you're hearing the silencer shots. Everyone's sort of ducked or has already been shot or died. And you're mostly looking at this barren wide shot of the precinct and like letters and papers are just flying up. Like you're just seeing kind of the ricochet of things like propelling into the air. But it's just sort of this like sound of someone blowing through a straw. It's
Right.
very odd.
Wait, I just found this quote from Carpenter about Frank Doubleday where he said, I discussed the character with the actor and he gave me the best explanation. He said, I don't want to play this as a man with a gun. I want it to play as a man who is a gun.
Damn.
And so he was like, that's what I wanted these people to be like, just trigger gun. Like that's all they are. They're just killing machines, literally. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that rules.
Actors are fun.
Yeah, actors are especially like, I mean, I'm Griffin, you're the actor. Like, just like you're coming in. Yeah, shut up. And it's like, what's your role? And you've read the script and you're like, yeah, well, I kill a kid. And now you have to sit there and think about like, okay, what do I want to, like, how do I want to be? Like, the action is here, but like, who am I? How am I going to convey a person who would do this? It's a weird job, Griff.
I will say, when I think about whether I ever want to act again, if that's like, or at least act on camera, like when I go back and forth on the idea now, coming out of a pandemic, I have no career ambitions anymore. There's nothing like, oh, I'd like to be this or have this level of success. I just think about experiential shit like that, where I'm just like, that might be a cool thing to do on camera. Not that I'm saying killing a girl on camera is cool, but you're just like, that's a weird scene. That's a weird day to spend. What's that like to spend a day figuring out how to do that? That's sort of the appeal to me. Once again, I want to restate, the appeal to me is not specifically the idea of killing girls. It is just an example of a bizarre scene.
But you could spend a day learning how to whip a chain and tie it around a guy's legs and pull him out from underneath him. That seems like, that for me, that's a big day.
Yeah, that's cool.
Well, now you're just pitching Ghost Rider 3. That would be the best day of your life.
Yeah. There's like a chain expert on set. Like he's, giving you tips.
Folks, it's summer. We all know about hot girl summer, white boy summer, hot orco summer, the 3 big summer trends that everyone's talking about. But no one's talking about wet stamp summer. Wet stamp summer. That's right. It's that sticky, damp weather where the stamps, you can't keep them dry. They're getting too sticky before you even lick them. They're sticking all over the place. But there has to be a better way. Because with stamps.com, you can skip trips to the post office and save on postage. And the postage they send you is stickers. That's the angle I'm choosing to take for this ad read. I'm making it about the fact that traditional stamps are having a hard time dealing with how damp the weather is. So you should use stamps.com instead. But of course, there are a number of reasons to not use stamps.com. You don't want to wait online at the post office. And it's also just easier. You can mail and ship anytime, anywhere, right from your computer. You can send letters, ship packages, and pay less, a lot less, with discounted rates from USPS and UPS. They should call it pay less stamps, like pay less shoes, but for stamps. That's what they should call this service. Stamps.com saves businesses thousands of hours and tons of money every year because it brings the US Postal and UPS shipping services right to your computer. They make it easy for small businesses to mail and ship without needing to take a trip to the post office. Every time you go to the post office, it's like National Lampoon's post office, in that it's always more complicated and full of crazy hijinks than you imagine. You print official US postage and shipping labels 24/7 without having to leave your desk or buy any fancy equipment. All you need is your computer and a standard printer. And once your mail is ready, you schedule a pickup or you drop it off. It's that simple. It's a no-brainer, like Frankenstein's monster before they sew his head up. And they've saved nearly 1 million small business owners like you time and money. They offer deals you can't get anywhere else, like up to 40% off USPS and up to 66% off UPS shipping rates. And with their switch and save feature, you can quickly compare carriers to find the best rates every time. Stop wasting time going to the post office. Go to stamps.com. Instead, keep those stamps dry. No wet stamp summer. Should have done damp stamp summer. There's no risk. And with my promo code CHECK, it's mine, it's not David's. And if he disagrees, he'll speak now. That's what I thought. With my promo code CHECK, you get a special offer that includes a 4-week trial plus free postage and a digital scale. No long-term commitments or contracts. Just go to stamps.com, click on the microphone at the top of the homepage, and type in CHECK. That's stamps.com, promo code CHECK. Stamps.com. Never go to the post office again and keep your stamps dry. I do like, April, as you said, like everyone in this movie is kind of unpleasant and nasty, right? And Ethan is like, the Bishop is the closest we have to like a hero in this movie. But the movie kind of mocks the idea that he wants to be seen as a hero. Yeah. It has a very cynical view of law enforcement. And his sort of defining move as a hero in a way, at least in terms of moral integrity, is just that he refuses to give up Lawson. that Nancy Loomis's character has the moment where she's like, well, it's just him, right? We can give him up and this is over. Like, it's a trolley cart problem.
Yeah.
Let them kill the one guy so 8 of us don't die. And he's just like, not going to happen. Not going to happen. He came here. He's having a really bad day. I told him he'd be safe. I'm going to do it.
Yeah, they could have just given him up, honestly. would have saved more lives.
Right, but it's just like, this is his moral code, which is like, this guy came to me, he asked me for help, and I said yes. I'm not going to go back on that.
And then also, obviously, the ending is so fantastic, where he's walk out with me to Wilson, the Bishop and Wilson walking out together in the smoke and stuff. And that
that fucking is so cool. Yeah. Wow.
It's so cool.
So cool.
And so quiet and not over the top. This is weirdly no part of this movie is over the top, even though a child gets shot. Does that make sense? Like,
yes.
Am I out of line saying that? Like, there's no melodrama to it.
No, and Wilson has all these weirdly profound lines, but all of them are like tossed off under his breath. I mean, wait, so in my situation, days are like women. Each one's so damn precious, but they all end up leaving you. And you're like, 99 out of 100 actors would have put too much mustard on that. They would have been too aware of the fact that they are saying cool guy dialogue.
Right. And Gotta Smoke, obviously, him saying that over and over again.
But like, he says everything like he's annoyed that he even has to say it, you know?
Okay. But wait, when he finally gets a cigarette, that scene, that scene, as someone who's been a smoker, and I feel like Carpenter too, right, is a smoker.
Mm-hmm.
That scene is so like full of just sexual tension. Like, I felt like my tongue was gonna roll out and steam was gonna come out of my ears and my eyes are gonna bug out of my head. Like, it was just so charged. Woo, man, it really got me.
I'm just looking at other Napoleon Wilson, which also, what a fucking good name. Yeah. But looking at other lines of his, where like all of these on paper read so purple, and he makes everyone sound like the coolest fucking thing you've ever heard. When Lee says the very least of our problems is that we're out of time, and he says, it's an old story with me. I was born out of time. Like, that rules.
It's very Hawksy. I mean, you can tell what he's sort of inspired by, right?
I did think of one over the top scene when they play potato.
Right.
That was a little. No, it was fun.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm using the right phrase when I say over the top. I guess it's more what Griff's saying, where it's like, it could be so goofy and not in a bad way. Like, I enjoy goofy. I enjoy pulpy. Like,
I love goofy. I'm Goofy Griff. They call me Goofy Griff for a reason.
You're a very goofy Griff, yes. But it doesn't. And it's the same thing with it, not being a Western and instead just being set in this kind of like concrete, dusty ass building. Like, the realism in heavy quotes is part of what makes it feel spookier. It's good. This is a good movie.
Yeah, I'm just taking a fucking warm bath in this quotes page. Ben, the chain moment you talk about, right?
Yeah.
The warden says, Wilson, I'm going to miss you. Wilson says, that's not the truth, warden. You should always tell the truth. Even a little lie can sometimes trip a man up. Then he trips him with a chain.
I know.
And his comeback is, he don't stand up as good as he used to.
Because he kicked him out of his chair earlier. Yeah. So he gets him back. Oh, man. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't sit in chairs as well as I used to. Is also just an incredible statement in a vacuum.
I love it.
It's so cool.
Is there anything else we want to talk about before we do the box office game? Just, it's obviously the final sequence is very tense and involving.
One of the things that I like is the kind of quietness of the end, because it's weird, because it's intense, but his control again, his mastery of sound he's like more master of sound than horror, honestly. He can
John Carpenter, master of sound.
Yes. He just knows
from the twisted ears of John Carpenter.
Exactly. Because you can hear like them stepping on like the kind of like spent shells and just like stuff, and it's just like, it's just really eerie and quiet. And then there's also the scenes of you can make out the shadows or sense of the gangs and in the kind of alley, and there's just kind of smoke filling the air, so it's just like this fog. And I was just like, shit, conquistadors. This is like going to be like the fog. This is like the
Right. They're going to have cutlasses.
Yeah. So yeah, that's just something I really liked.
It's really fucking great. And it's also interesting that like this movie came out and didn't really make much of an impression. Critics weren't really standing for it. It didn't get much of an audience. And then it goes to Europe and people lose their fucking minds. And then I feel like it was very shortly thereafter kind of reclaimed by an American genre audience.
I think Carpenter's thing is like in America, they sold it as like a blood and guts movie, which it's not good enough on that regard, right? Like it's not, that's not really what, that's not the, he was like, it should have been sold as like a suspense film. Like it's not really going for hyper gore. And so maybe that was part of the problem, but I don't know. Obviously it's a low budget movie. It was sort of being distributed that way.
But yeah, I mean, it went to Cannes, and then UK critics really started championing it and championing the idea of like, this is a filmmaker here.
What's his big quote? Come on. Here, I'm going to look it up. The famous one. In France, I'm an auteur. In Germany, I'm a filmmaker. In Britain, I'm a genre film director. And in the US, I'm a bum, right? Like that's his big joke. He's like about, how Europe always sort of took him more seriously. Yeah.
5 comedy points. Yeah.
Have you guys seen the remake? I saw the remake in theaters and I remember it being like solid. I don't remember it very well.
I do too. And I will say, I think it is probably the most successful of the Carpenter remakes because it is the one that kind of just uses his movie as a starting point.
Right.
Like the characters are entirely different in that. The setup is pretty fundamentally changed. It really just is the idea of like, here's the worst precinct that's about to shut down, right? And a standoff happening there. But like, because from what I remember, Lawrence Fishburne is sort of taking the Wilson role, but he's like a crime boss. And obviously, Fishburne's going to give you a very different performance, but the character as written is also entirely different. Ethan Hawke is kind of this squirrely former undercover cop who's sort of haunted and trying to like get over an accidental death, I think, that he was responsible for. It's a very different movie, and so it stands better on its own because it's not just a shittier version of Carpenter with more money filled into it, which a lot of the other remakes are.
April, have you seen it? Do you care about Jean-Francois Richet?
I haven't seen it, but it doesn't mean that I don't want to because I love that cast. I think
it's a great cast.
Yeah, and the basic premise is something that can obviously be retooled again and again for, like starting off with Rio Bravo or whatever it was. And then, I just think that it's one of those timeless things. So I'd be interested in it.
That's the other thing. Like John Hawkes himself remade Rio Bravo. Like we used to be a lot less precious with these concepts, and whether they were literal remakes or kind of spiritual remakes or inspired by or whatever, it's better to approach things that way than be Howard like, Hawks, we have to go beat by beat. Sorry, Howard Hawks. What did I say? Howard Hughes?
You said John Hawkes.
Oh, I think. God, he's a fine actor.
We like him, yeah.
We do like him.
The remake stinks, right? I have seen the remake's the one with Dean Martin and John Wayne.
Oh, yes. I have not seen the remake. Yes.
It's stinky. Yeah.
What's it called? Rio...
It's
Grande?
Rio Bravo.
No. Right, but there's another movie that's almost identical to Rio Bravo that Hawks made that I'm forgetting now.
Okay.
I mean, most filmmakers just remake the same movie again and again.
Yes, so. This is my point. Yes. I just know there's like an explicit... Because I love the original.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember now. But anyway, beyond that, it's like, as you guys said, it's you can transmute this to anywhere. You could do it in space. You could do it under the sea. I don't know. It would be hard. It's a tower defense movie.
Good movie, good director.
Well, it's going to be like that with these early Carpenters. We're going to be like, you know what? Like a lot of these were like, yeah, it fucking works. Halloween delivers. Escape from New York, a lot of fun.
Howard Hawks did El Dorado with John Wayne and Robert Mitchum. And then he remade it a third time with John Wayne called Rio Lobo.
That's the shitty one I think.
Right. The Dean Martin one's the good one.
Yeah. What was it? Okay, this is a wild box office. And which is part of the fun of these old box offices, before the heyday of opening weekends. All right. So this movie came out November 1976. Okay, number one at the box office is a rare Woody Allen movie that he did not direct.
Play it again, Sam?
Nope.
The Front?
The Front is number 1 at the box
That
office.
is
Hollywood
bizarre.
I
blacklist
don't
drama.
like this world. Ugh.
Yeah. That's
it's
weird. It's especially weird because none of the movies he directed were especially huge hits at this time. Like, that's bigger than most of his films performed.
The next 3 movies are what you would consider, big hits of the year or whatever. And I was just like, what is The Front doing number 1? It in November at like a pretty big deal time. Anyway,
Zero Mostel is great in that movie. Zero Mostel has like an incredible supportive
I've
performance
never
in that
seen The
movie.
Front. It's Martin Ritt, right? Sort of like a,
Yeah, it's a blacklist movie.
Right,
and
but it's an intelligent, sober drama type thing, right?
No, it's like a sad comedy, I would say.
Sure.
About a difficult subject, but Woody Allen plays the guy who's serving as the front for Zero Mostel, who's like the Trumbo-esque screenwriter who can no longer work, and Mostel's pretty heartbreaking, and he's really fucking good.
All right, so The Front, number 1. Number 2, it's by the way, April, we're guessing the top 5. I forgot. We didn't.
This is what I was talking about. I remember these numbers. I mean, I don't remember these ones. I don't have this memorized, but very often I remember every box office weekend I've lived through because my brain is broken.
Number 2, it's a big hit thriller of the year. It's an adaptation of a big book by a heavyweight screenwriter, pretty heavyweight director. Big star above the title, and then a big star below the title, getting an Oscar.
Marathon Man?
It's Marathon Man.
Yeah.
Great tagline. What's the tagline, Griffin?
Ow! This is why I don't like going to the dentist.
The tagline is literally a thriller.
Well, that is a great tagline, and maybe we should bring that back. Movies are saying too much. Just tell me what you are.
It's a thriller, all right?
Yeah.
Marathon Man is half a good movie. It's one of those things you watch it, you're like, right, this could do with a little tightening. This could do with a little more sexiness, honestly. Like it's a little too sober, but it's pretty good. I don't know. Yeah. Olivier's having fun. April, do you care about Marathon Man?
I think it's okay. I don't remember it much.
Yeah. I mean, apart from the dentist scene, it's got a good ending too. Them in that weird, like they're in like a dam or something right there. Anyway.
David, do you know what time of day is best to watch Marathon Man?
No. What time of day?
2:30.
Why?
2:30.
Okay. Because all right. Jesus Christ.
The dentist scene.
Yeah. All right.
April has flipped over her computer and setting her microphone on fire.
Number 3 at the box office, a comedy. One of my dad's favorite comedies. He loved this movie. So I owned it on VHS, or he did, or whatever. Like it was in the house. Sort of an ensemble movie. It's like a musical that's not actually a musical.
Sure.
It's got, a bunch of sort of character actors and stars. The cast is mostly black. It's got a famous screenwriter.
Is it Car Wash?
It's Car Wash.
Car Wash was one of your dad's favorite movies?
He fucking loved Car Wash.
Written by Joel Schumacher, as you were alluding to. Yeah.
Right. My dad was a big Richard Pryor guy in general, and that's probably why he loved it. But Richard Pryor doesn't have a huge part in Car Wash. He kind of...
No.
Yeah, but so I don't know. I mean, he was one
like
of those
Silver
movies where
Streak.
he was like...
It's that early era where they would like bring Richard Pryor in for 3 scenes and then advertise the movie as Richard Pryor finally busting loose on the screen. And you're like, he's in it for 10 minutes and there's some boring plot I don't care about the rest of the time.
Right. Him sitting me down being like, we got to watch Car Wash. It rules. And me being like, this is okay. Like, I don't think I get half of this, but anyway.
I saw Blue Collar has been playing at Film Forum recently. I went to see it. I'd seen it before, but I hadn't seen it on a big screen. I wish Pryor had done like 10 of those.
Right.
Like, I'm not saying I wish he did less comedies, but I wish he had done more dramas. He was such a fucking good actor.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just compelling. Just the camera loves him.
And one of those people where it's a little bit like Sandler, where you could put him in a drama with like a heavy duty director and he wouldn't dull himself. Like, he'll still be very funny in a drama. He's just tapping into more of a darkness and an anger that was always underneath the surface with him.
Number 4 at the box office, Griffin. New this week. Okay. A definitive horror film of the 70s. Made by a man that John Carpenter thinks is a Hitchcock copying hack.
So it's a De Palma.
Yeah.
76. it would be Carrie.
It's Carrie.
Yeah, wow.
Good movie. Whatever
Good movie.
Carpenter wants to say. I enjoy Carrie. April Carrie fan.
I'm a huge De Palma fan. I love all
Me
De Palma.
too. I love Brian De Palma. He's
Just
the
like
best.
make it sicker and weirder, and I love all of his stuff.
Holy mackerel.
Holy mackerel. But Carrie rules. Carrie's one of those things where you go in knowing the 8 things about Carrie, right? Like, because you can't escape, hearing about all the...
But the stuff in between is so good.
Yeah, it's so fucking good. It's so banana. I love Carrie. All right, Carrie's great. But that's new this week. So if we ever do De Palma, Griff, we'll have done this box office.
Wow. We'll come back to this and I'll run the table.
All right. Number 5 is a movie I do not know. So I'm going to look it up. Let's see. It is a British-American comedy farce based on a play.
Well, how would you know that?
He just looked it up.
Oh, okay.
One of those posters that's like drawn by Al Hirschfeld. You know what I mean? Where
Oh,
you're
boy.
like, oh,
Yep.
this is classy.
Yeah.
You got Jack Weston, Rita Moreno, Jerry Stiller, F. Murray Abraham.
Fuck.
It's a madcap farce. It's directed by Richard Lester of A Hard Day's Night.
Fuck.
Its title is that of in April, if you know, please also, jump in. Its title is that of a hotel. I think it's one of those things where it's like we're moving. Oh, wow. It's set in a gay bathhouse in 1976. Huh.
What?
And we're like moving from room to room and there's like sort of various skits. It's based on a Terrence McNally play.
I don't think I know what this... It's not Hot Out Baltimore, right?
No, it's called The Ritz.
Jesus, I never even heard of it. The Ritz.
Wow, that cast.
It's a good cast.
Bathhouse. Wow. Okay.
Fuck, and this poster.
I think it's like a wild sort of, screwball comedy kind of thing with this sort of transgressive, Terrence McNally. So this is what I love about these old box office games. You're like these sort of forgotten movies. I mean, I say forgotten. Someone will probably yell at me.
Yeah.
Some other, like there's a movie number 6, the Red Fox movie, Norman, Is That You?
Oh, yeah.
The one I think which we talked about, right? Which is just him grumbling about how his whole family is, he's like, well, women's lib and everyone's gay or whatever. Like he's the grumpy dad.
Yeah.
I have not seen it.
It's called At Mentions the movie.
There's a movie called Shout at the Devil, which is like a big war movie starring Lee Marvin set in like Zanzibar in the turn of the century.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Is it the thing? No, I'm sorry. I'm just trying to remember why Norman Is That You came up in a previous episode.
It was in one of our old box office games.
I know, but wasn't the weird thing with it that the play was about a Jewish family or something? There was like...
Yes.
The film version changes the locale from New York City to Los Angeles and substitutes an African-American family for a Jewish family in the original play. And Dennis Dugan plays the third lead. Everything about this is weird. Okay, sorry. I was just trying to remember why this was in my brain. Okay.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, we're done. That's there's that horny Alice in Wonderland movie. Remember that one? We talked about that too.
Like I could ever forget a title that now haunts me. Yeah.
Lingering down there. And another one, something called The Slipper and the Rose. I want to look up. Is this also... No, this is just this is a classic retelling of the Cinderella tale starring Richard Chamberlain. Okay.
Chamberlain.
Looks pretty... It's like a musical. It's got lots and lots of songs.
It's based on Cinderella. Wow.
It's Cinderella.
It's one of those things I feel like whenever we do an earlier box office game, by earlier I mean anything before 1980, right? And sometimes this is a thing in the 80s as well. But I feel like people talk about this, and not enough, that every time we have switched to a different home media format, more movies get lost, right? Where they were like, there will never be as many movies released on DVD as there were on VHS, and less so on Blu-ray, and less so on 4K. And now it feels like in the streaming era, less and less of these films are getting remastered and put up on streaming services. Other than, some of these boutique things that curate. And thank God HBO Max seems to have a little bit of a cultural history to it. But you're just like, all right, Norman, Is That You? Is there any way to watch that movie? Even
question.
if there is it in any sort of like public consciousness? I'm not saying that's a film that needs to be preserved, but also all movies should be preserved.
No, but the real problem with streaming is more like maybe it is available, but like would Amazon even bother to tell you? No, but you can rent Norman, Is That You on Apple for $2 if you really want to. So
yeah, I want to, and I'm going to do it. I'm canceling my plans. I'm staying home tonight and asking the key question, the big question. Norman, is that you? Like Slipper and the Rose. Doesn't that just feel weird that there's some big live action Cinderella musical that all of us are like, huh? Really?
Yeah.
It's available to watch on Hoopla with subs.
Hoopla. There's a lot of stuff that I just don't even know about. These like streaming things.
Yeah.
I refuse to know what Hoopla is. I won't find out.
I'm gonna force you, David. David, I'm gonna sneak into your home in the middle of the night and wake you up with an iPad in front of your face, and Hoopla's gonna be playing. You're gonna be looking at the fucking Hoopla main page, the interface, and there's nothing you can do to stop me, David. It's gonna be when you least expect. I'm gonna make you look at Hoopla.
You can't. I won't do it. All right, we're done. Thank you so much, April.
Oh, thank you for having me.
Griffin.
No, I want to thank April. You rule. Long overdue, but I think this was a great one to have you on for.
I hope so. I really appreciate it. It's fun to talk about John Carpenter and his lesser known or lesser loved works that are all still good.
And you were talking facetiously before we started recording about how you're working on stuff that you can't talk about yet. So it just seems like all you're doing is chilling on Twitter.
Yeah, just assume that I get paid to be on Twitter.
Right, you're getting paid to be on Twitter. You're part of the blue check mark agenda.
Yeah,
pushing Brigade being paid by big government to perpetuate lies.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's like a lot of hippies who are paying me right now, along with Soros.
Yes.
So I'm actually doing quite well on that front, and I never have to work again. So. Yeah, that's it.
Well, congratulations on that. You've cracked the code. You're a great follow. People should follow you. And I look forward to you having new work that we can see in theaters or on screens soon. But at A Wolfeful on Twitter.
Yeah, I made it difficult. Well, thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Our pleasure. And thank you all for listening. See, I shifted the you. I'm thinking
you did the you shift.
You now, the people listening.
I tried to give that to you because I liked it when people would say that, and I could be like, "And thank you for listening."
I appreciate it. And the thing with me is, I'm so clumsy that I never take a straight slide like that when someone gives me the runway. I then have to stop and explain exactly what I was doing because I lack confidence in all areas. But thank you all for listening. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe. Thank you to Marie Barty for our social media. Thank you to JJ Borsch and Nick Lariano for our research. Lane Montgomery and the Great American Novel for our theme song. Pat Bowen and Joe Reynolds for our artwork.
You flipped
that.
those.
I said,
yeah.
Jesus Christ. We were not recording that much because David had a baby and I was sick and Ben rode a dang horse. And since then, I got out of the loop of having to repeat the intro and outro every week. And I have not been able to get back into the flow of things.
You'll
I fucked
get
something
back
up.
into it.
No, I never will.
All right, fine.
Thank you to Pat Reynolds and Joe Bowen for our artwork.
Well, I think the next group of names, our editors would like it if you did, in fact, get it together, Griffin.
No, here's the challenge I'm going to do. I'm going to say their names backwards and they have to edit it into the proper order.
Wow.
Thank you to AJ McKeon and Alex Barron for our editing. Such an asshole.
Yeah, come on.
Go to blankies.reddit.com for some real nerdy shit. And you can go to patreon.com/blankcheck for Blank Check special features where we do commentaries. And we're currently deep in the tomb with the fucking mummy. We're hanging out with Imhotep, right?
I can't remember.
Probably.
Yeah.
Or we're doing Riddick. I don't know. Either way.
We're
doing one of those
Riddick
two
right
things.
now, but whatever. Well, we announced all of it. We're doing Riddick right now.
Okay, we're chilling in the dark with Riddick. So put on your goggles and join our Patreon. Tune in next week for, as I already spoiled, Halloween with Alex Ross Perry, where he apparently choose us a new one. I got that wrong. It's tears us a new one. What does choose us a new one?
I guess it's
He's just chewing on your asshole.
Yeah.
He's chewing on our asshole. Tune in next week.
Chewing out an asshole into another part of your body for you.
tune in next week when acclaimed filmmaker Alex Ross Perry comes on the show and with his teeth creates a new asshole on a different part of my body as we discuss the landmark film Halloween. And as always, I want to end this episode by just reading a couple more Napoleon Wilson quotes. Lieutenant Ethan Bishop says, looks pretty good to me. Napoleon Wilson says, looks like hell. It's all we got. That's cool.
Pretty good.
Napoleon Wilson, chains is all I've got to look forward to. That's a Ben quote.
Yeah, I mean, that's a fucking delightful quote. I get it.
Lieutenant Ethan Bishop, your final lines. I'll end with this. His final lines. You're pretty fancy, Wilson. Napoleon Wilson. I have moments. It's fucking cool.
Such a good ending.